I was 31 years old the first time I booked a flight by myself. Not the first time I flew somewhere. I'd flown plenty of times, but always with my mother on the phone, reading me the booking confirmation, double-checking the seat selection, asking if I'd remembered to actually print on paper the boarding pass. Just in case. Because phones die, she said. Because you never know. I remember sitting at my laptop that evening, credit card in hand, and my heart was doing something strange. Not excitement. Closer to fear. The kind of fear that has no logical source, that lives in the body rather than the mind, that says you are not capable of this in a voice that sounds, if you listen closely enough, exactly like your mother's. I booked the flight. Then I sat very still for a long time, waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing did. That was almost worse. My parents were not bad people. I need to say that clearly before anything else, because this story is not about villains. My mother and father loved me. They loved me so completely, so urgently, so without pause or boundary, that the love itself became the problem. My mother's name is Alina. She is warm and funny and makes the best soup I have ever eaten in my life. She also called me every day until I was 26, sometimes twice. She drove 40 minutes to my university apartment to drop off cold medicine when I had a sniffle. She read every essay I wrote before I submitted it, not to help me improve it, but to check that it was safe, that I hadn't written anything that might upset a professor, damage my grades, cause a problem. My father, David, was quieter about it. He expressed his anxiety through preparation. Every car I ever drove had been inspected by him the day before. Every neighborhood I ever moved to had been researched: crime statistics, proximity to hospitals, quality of the nearest grocery store. He built spreadsheets. For my life. Actual spreadsheets, color-coded, with contingency columns. They meant well. They always meant well. But meaning well and doing well are not always the same thing. The word I learned much later was enmeshment. It's a psychological term for when the boundaries between people, between parents and children, most commonly become so blurred that it's difficult to know where one person ends and another begins. Not abuse. Not cruelty. Something subtler and in some ways harder to name because it wears the face of love so convincingly. I didn't know the word growing up. What I knew was the feeling. The feeling of being watched. Not surveilled, watched. The way you watch something precious and fragile. A feeling that communicated in every small gesture and every anxious phone call that the world was dangerous and I was not quite equipped to handle it alone. That feeling became my operating system. By the time I was 20, I had never resolved a conflict without my mother's guidance. Never made a significant decision without running it past my father's spreadsheet logic. Never sat with discomfort long enough to discover that I could survive it. Every time difficulty appeared, someone appeared with it, ready to absorb it, smooth it, make it go away before I had to feel it fully. I was loved past the point of being allowed to become. The first crack appeared when I was 24. I got a job offer. A good one in a city 4 hours away. A real career step, the kind of opportunity that doesn't repeat itself often. I was terrified and excited in equal measure, which is exactly how you're supposed to feel when your life is about to change. I told my parents at dinner. My mother put down her fork. My father said 4 hours is a long way. What followed was not an argument exactly. My parents didn't argue. They expressed concern. Carefully, lovingly, relentlessly. The city was expensive. The apartment market was difficult. I didn't know anyone there. What would I do if I got sick? What would I do if something went wrong? They weren't saying don't go, they were just saying, have you really thought about this? Again and again and again in different configurations until the question wasn't really a question anymore. It was a wait. I didn't take the job. I told myself it was my decision. It was not my decision. The next few years are painful to describe because so little happened in them. I stayed in the city where I'd grown up. I got a smaller job, a fine job, a job my parents could reach me from in 40 minutes. I had dinner with them on Sundays. I called my mother most evenings. I was, by every visible measure, a functioning adult. But inside I was something else. I was afraid of almost everything. Not in a dramatic way, not panic attacks in the grocery store. In a quieter, more pervasive way. The fear of making the wrong choice. The fear of conflict. The fear of being somewhere without a safety net, which meant, in practice, the fear of being somewhere without my parents. I had been so thoroughly protected from failure that I had never developed any relationship with it. And so failure, even the small, ordinary, survivable kind, seemed catastrophic. Seemed like proof of exactly what that voice in my head had always suggested, that I was not quite capable. That the world required more than I had. I was 26 years old and I was afraid of my own life. The thing that changed it was a therapist named Dr. Osai. I didn't go willingly. I went because a woman I was seeing, her name was Clara, and she was patient with me for longer than she should have been, told me gently but clearly that she felt like she was dating someone who was already in a relationship with his parents. That landed hard. I called Dr. Osai the following week. The first thing he asked me in our first session was, "What do you want?" Not what did my parents want for me. Not what was the safe choice, the sensible choice, the choice least likely to cause concern. What did I want? I sat there for a long time. I didn't know. That was the beginning. Therapy is not a quick fix. I want to be honest about that. There was no single session where everything became clear, no breakthrough moment where I walked out into the sunlight a fully formed person. It was slow. It was uncomfortable. It required me to look at my parents not as the loving figures I had always experienced them as, but as people, complicated, anxious, well-intentioned people who had passed their own fears onto me as carefully as a gift. Dr. Osai helped me understand that my parents' hyperprotection had come from somewhere. My mother had lost a brother young. My father had grown up poor in genuine scarcity, where things did go wrong and there was no safety net. Their anxiety was not invented. It was inherited, earned, real. But it was theirs. And they had given it to me as if it were mine. Part of the work, the hardest part, was learning to hand it back. Not with anger. Not with accusation. Just with clarity. This is yours. I love you. But I can't carry it anymore. The conversation with my parents was the hardest thing I have ever done. Not because they reacted badly. They didn't, not exactly. My mother cried. My father went very quiet. But they listened. And when I told them carefully, with as much love as I could hold in my voice, that I needed space to make my own mistakes, my own choices, my own life, something shifted in the room. My mother said, "I just never wanted anything bad to happen to you." I said, "I know. But some things have to happen to me. That's what living is." She cried more after that. So did I, honestly. I am 34 now. I live in a city 4 hours from where I grew up. Not the same opportunity as before, that one passed, as opportunities do when you're not ready for them. But another one came, because they do come again, if you're paying attention. I talk to my mother twice a week. Not every day. Twice a week, and the conversations are better than they ever were, more honest, more equal, more like two adults who love each other than like a lifeguard and someone drowning. My father still makes spreadsheets. But now he emails them to me and adds, "Just in case you want it, no pressure." He learned that phrase. I don't take for granted how much that cost him. I still feel fear sometimes. I still hear that voice, the one that says the world is dangerous and I am not quite equipped. But I know whose voice it is now. And I know because I have tested it enough times to be certain that it is wrong. Last month I booked a flight. By myself. Without checking it with anyone. It was a Tuesday. The coffee was getting cold. I clicked confirm and I felt not the fear I used to feel. Something lighter. Something that might, if I'm being honest, have been the first edge of freedom. 3 years late, but mine. Entirely, finally mine.